Dubai currently has about 3.5 million people, but only around 400,000 truly possess real freedom. Every night, while tourists sip champagne and influencers capture perfect moments, another reality unfolds just miles away. Inside windowless concrete rooms, 12 men lie on thin mattresses in extreme heat, silently enduring their reality. They came chasing a dream sold to them, a promise of success that cost their families everything. They built every tower, cleaned every hotel, and paved every road you admire in Dubai today. Today, we're going to show you the Dubai they never want you to see. And once you see it, you may never look at this city the same way again. Dubai is one of the most recognized cities in the modern world, a place where ambition seems to have no limits and luxury feels almost ordinary. From the outside, it looks like a perfect destination, a city where glass towers rise from the desert and wealth flows endlessly. Every year, millions of tourists arrive here chasing a dream that has been carefully crafted and sold across the world. Scroll through social media, and Dubai appears almost unreal. Infinity pools, private beaches, designer stores, and skyline views that feel like a movie. But what if that image is only one side of the story? Because behind this polished image lies a structure that most people never see. Dubai today has a population of over 3.5 million people, yet only a small fraction actually belong to the country as citizens. Roughly 11% of the population are native Emiratis, while the remaining 89% are foreign workers and expatriates. That means the vast majority of people living in Dubai are not permanent residents. They are temporary participants in a system. In many ways, Dubai functions less like a traditional nation and more like a global hub, a place people come to work, earn, and eventually leave. And this creates a very unique kind of society, a society where stability, family life, and long-term roots are not the foundation, but rather productivity and efficiency. In fact, around 70% of the population is male, creating a demographic imbalance rarely seen in major global cities. This is not the natural structure of a balanced society. It resembles something closer to a labor-driven system. Men from countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh arrive here with a single purpose: to work. Not to settle, not to build families, but to support a machine that runs continuously. And yet, when the world looks at Dubai, none of this is visible. Instead, what people see is a carefully curated image of success, a city where everything appears perfect, efficient, and limitless. But this illusion is built on contrast, a gap so large that it almost feels invisible. Visuals, split screen, luxury lifestyle versus labor conditions. Because while some live in penthouses overlooking the marina, others exist on the margins of the same city. A single apartment in Dubai Marina can cost more in 1 week than a worker earns in years. And yet, both realities exist side by side, separated not by distance, but by visibility. Workers often live in isolated areas, far from tourist centers, places rarely shown in travel videos or advertisements. They wake up before sunrise, board buses, and disappear into construction sites long before the city wakes up. And by the time tourists step outside to explore the city, those workers are already invisible again. This separation is not accidental. It is part of how the system maintains its image. Because the Dubai that is sold to the world is not meant to include everyone. It is designed to showcase perfection, not complexity. Even the media plays a role in reinforcing this narrative. Stories focus on innovation, architecture, and economic growth, rarely on the people behind it. The workers who build the city remain largely invisible in these narratives. They are present everywhere, in every road, every building, every hotel, yet almost never acknowledged. And this raises a critical question. Is Dubai truly a shared success story? Or is it a system built on unequal visibility? Because when a city depends so heavily on a workforce that remains unseen, it creates an illusion of perfection that is carefully maintained. And that illusion is powerful. Powerful enough to attract millions of visitors, billions in investment, and global admiration, but also fragile. Because the moment you begin to look beyond the surface, you start to see a very different picture. And once that picture becomes clear, it becomes impossible to ignore what lies beneath the dream. If part one showed you the illusion, this is where we step into the mechanism behind it. Because the system that holds everything together in Dubai is not just economic, it is legal. It is called the Kafala system, a sponsorship structure that defines who you are, where you live, and whether you can stay. On paper, it sounds simple. A company sponsors a worker, provides a visa, and offers employment. But in reality, that sponsorship becomes something much deeper, a form of total dependency. Because in Dubai, a migrant worker's right to exist in the country is tied directly to their employer, not the law, not the state, but a single sponsor, and that changes everything. If a worker decides to leave their job without permission, it is not treated as a simple resignation. It is labeled as absconding, a legal offense. Instead of finding another opportunity, the worker risks detention, fines, or immediate deportation. Imagine being in a country where quitting your job could make you a criminal overnight. And even when a contract ends, freedom is still not guaranteed. To change jobs, workers often need a no objection certificate, no C, from their employer. That single document becomes a gatekeeper of your future. Without it, you cannot move forward, no matter how unfair your current situation may be. And in many cases, that power is used as leverage. Workers report being forced to stay under worse conditions simply because they cannot obtain that approval. Even more concerning is what happens the moment workers arrive in the country. Many are asked to hand over their passports to employers for processing or safekeeping. Officially, this practice is restricted, but in reality it still happens widely. And without a passport, a worker loses more than just a document. They lose mobility, they lose access to basic services, and most importantly, they lose control over their own identity. Because without identification, you cannot leave the country, open a bank account, or even communicate properly. It creates a situation where survival itself depends on the employer, and that dependence becomes a silent form of control. Now imagine another layer added on top of this. Wages delayed for months, promises changed after arrival, and no clear way to challenge it, because reporting abuse is not always a safe option. If a worker complains, the employer can retaliate by canceling the visa, and once that happens, the worker becomes undocumented overnight. From that moment, everything changes. They are no longer protected, they are vulnerable. This is why many workers choose silence, not because they accept the conditions, but because the cost of resistance is too high. And that is what makes the system so effective. It doesn't rely on visible force, it relies on structure, a structure where every path leads back to the same point, dependency. Because when your job controls your visa, and your visa controls your existence, there is no real exit, at least not without consequences. And this is where the illusion from part 1 begins to break, because behind the luxury, there is a system that many cannot leave, even if they want to. If the system controls movement, debt is what locks people inside it. Because long before these workers even arrive in Dubai, the trap has already begun. To secure a job in the Gulf, many workers are forced to pay recruitment agents between $1,000 and $3,000. For families earning only a few dollars a day, this is not just money, it is everything they own. Some sell their last piece of land. Others take high-interest loans that will follow them for years, and all of it is based on a promise. A stable job, a decent salary, a chance to change their future. But the moment they arrive, reality begins to shift. Because in many cases, the contract they signed back home is not the contract they receive in Dubai. Salaries that were promised at $400 or $500 suddenly drop by 40% or even 50%. And at that point, there is no real choice left because going back home is not an option. Returning means facing debt, shame, and financial collapse. So they stay. And that's where the real trap begins. Because after basic expenses, many workers are left with barely $200 per month. At that rate, it can take 18 to 24 months just to repay the initial recruitment debt. Which means for nearly 2 years, they are not working to earn. They are working to survive. This is what experts call debt bondage. But here it doesn't look like chains. It looks like numbers on a ledger. And those numbers control everything, because the moment you resist, complain, or try to leave, you risk losing everything, not just your job, but your family's future. And while this financial pressure builds silently, the physical conditions tell another story. In areas like Sonapur, workers live in crowded accommodations far from the city's luxury zones. Inside, rooms designed for a few people often hold 12 to 16 men. Privacy does not exist. Comfort does not exist. And in the peak of summer, temperatures can exceed 110 degrees. Yet every day, these workers step onto construction sites, surrounded by steel structures that trap and radiate heat like ovens, under conditions where even standing still feels unbearable. But stopping is not an option, because deadlines matter more than discomfort, and sometimes, even more than life itself. There have been countless reports of young, healthy workers collapsing unexpectedly. Deaths often labeled as natural causes or cardiac arrest, even when conditions suggest extreme heat stress. But without proper investigation, the truth rarely surfaces, and families back home are left with more than grief. They are left with unanswered questions, and no compensation. Because if a death is not officially linked to work conditions, companies are not required to pay, and the system continues, uninterrupted. Meanwhile, the luxury world above continues as if nothing has changed. People swim in temperature-controlled pools, dine in 5-star restaurants, and admire a skyline built by the very people they will never see. This is the paradox, a city of extreme wealth, built on extreme sacrifice. And for millions of workers, this is not temporary hardship. It is a cycle, one that is incredibly difficult to escape. Because even if you want to leave, the system, the debt, and the risk follow you. And that is what makes this more than just labor. It makes it a trap. By now, you've seen the illusion, the system, and the trap. But there is one final question that matters more than anything else. If all of this exists, why doesn't the world talk about it? The answer lies in something far more powerful than infrastructure or money. It lies in control, of narrative, of visibility, and of attention. Because in Dubai, silence is not accidental. It is structured. Start with one critical fact. Workers in the UAE do not have the right to form unions. They cannot organize strikes. They cannot collectively negotiate for better conditions. And without collective voice, individual resistance becomes almost impossible. Because if one person speaks up, they risk being labeled as a problem. And once that happens, the most powerful tool is used: deportation. Deportation is not just removal from a country. For these workers, it means losing everything: their income, their purpose, their ability to repay debt. And because of that, silence becomes survival. Now zoom out beyond the workers themselves. Look at the global media. Why are these stories rarely front-page news? Part of the answer lies in access. Foreign journalists often face limitations when trying to report from labor areas, and without access, stories remain untold. But there's another layer: distraction. Dubai has mastered the art of capturing global attention. From international sporting events to luxury tourism campaigns, the world is constantly shown something else to focus on. And it works. Because while people are watching yacht parties and skyline views, they are not looking at labor camps. Social media plays a massive role in this. Influencers are invited, sponsored, and promoted to showcase only the luxury side of Dubai. Their content reaches millions of people. And over time, that becomes the only version of Dubai most people know. At the same time, major global corporations continue to operate here. Many of them promote ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards, in their home countries. But when operating in regions like Dubai, those standards often become flexible, because the system allows them to reduce costs, and profit, in many cases, outweighs accountability. Even governments play a role in this silence. The UAE is a major economic partner for many countries. It is involved in energy, finance, and global investments. And because of that, criticism is often softened or avoided entirely. Even countries that send workers, like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, rarely push aggressively, because billions of dollars flow back home through remittances, and that economic dependency creates another layer of silence. So what you're looking at is not just a local issue, it's a global system, supported by economics, politics, and attention, a system where everyone benefits, except the people at the bottom. And that is why the reality remains hidden, because it is easier for the world to accept the dream than to confront the cost behind it. But now you've seen both sides. The question is, what happens next? Because awareness changes perception, and perception shapes choices. So the real question is not about Dubai anymore, it's about us. Now that you know the reality behind the skyline, will it change the way you see it? Or will we keep scrolling? Because the dream is easier to watch than the truth is to face.